You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. It's close to deep left field by Alvarez. He's homered in 4 straight games for the second time in he's homered in 4.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast, Mets Spring Training live stream. Today, we're going to be going over the game that we just saw today happening between the New York Mets and the Washington Nationals, where the New York Mets were victorious by a score of 3-1. I appreciate everybody in the chat so far and taking a little bit chunk out of your night to come talk some Mets baseball with me. As always, you know what to do here on the stream. Hit the live chat. Drop those thoughts, comments, opinions. We got a lot to talk about tonight, guys. We will get right into it here. Hit that thumbs up. And most importantly, if you're new here, bottom right-hand corner, subscribe to the channel. Well on our way to 700 or 600 subscribers. Sorry, one step at a time. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. I definitely appreciate it. Like I said, hit the live chat. Become a channel member today. CP New York Sports merchandise just came in the mail. I'm going to be sending that out to everybody that is a member of the channel. And I'll be doing some giveaways on the channel as well. So make sure you're paying attention to that. But let's get right into the game here. First off, I want to shout out some people here in the chat. Shout out Lane saying, let's go Mets. And shout out Aaron from Blue Shirts banner. Fujinami with the clean cleats. He's saying, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button as well. I always appreciate you, Aaron. Thank you so much for the support. Okay, we have a lot to talk about. You see the batter's box, the batting score, box score, whatever you want to call it, on the left-hand side of your screen, and you have the notable pitchers from today's action on the right. We had a couple of debuts here for our New York Mets. Obviously, Joey Wendell on the offensive side of the ball, and Mr. Shintaro Fujinami on the pitching side of the ball, as well as Adam Ottavino, who we'll get to here in just a second. Listen, let's talk about Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, Brandon Nimmo is going to be a mainstay in this lineup. It's nice that we're seeing him early and often here in spring training. Healthy, getting the legs from up underneath him. 2 singles today, up the middle. Love what I see from Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, Lindor, Marte, Alonso take the offers. But I really want to hone in on Brett Batty and Mark Vientos here on the offensive side of the ball. Before I do that, though, let's talk about Francisco Alvarez having an absolute day doing it all for the New York Mets. Obviously, Francisco Lindor got the RBI early on in the ball game for the New York Mets. Or actually, I believe he got it later on. I believe he was the 3rd run to get batted in. But nonetheless, 2-run bomb from Francisco Alvarez. High fastball. Do not throw it at his letters. He is taking that ball right out of the stadium. That was an absolute tank. I like what I see from Francisco Alvarez, not only offensively with his 2nd home run of spring training, but defensively. 3 runners were thrown out today behind the plate from Francisco Alvarez. This is a young catcher who showed just the tip of the iceberg of what he can provide defensively last season, taking that next step here. It's an absolute treasure to have him behind the plate, only getting stronger. And 2 of those 3 putouts from behind the plate came with Adam Ottavino on the mound. If you've been listening into the True Mets Talk podcast, I went over Adam Ottavino when he re-signed, dropped a video about him, and talked about how he was one of the worst pitchers last season in terms of holding runners on. And I still think that trend will continue. But nonetheless, he looked like he was getting a little bit shorter in his stride to home plate with runners on. And that is going to be key for Adam Ottavino, especially when he renders a leadoff hit or a leadoff walk, not turning that initial single or walk into 2 bases automatically. And you saw that happen. Leadoff guy on for Adam Ottavino. And the very first pitch, the base runner for the Nationals tries to steal, but Francisco Alvarez is there to save the day. 3 putouts from Francisco Alvarez. But let's talk about what we all want to talk about here, obviously, with Brett Batty and Mark Vientos. Guys, I've said it time and time again. I was on X earlier, pretty much live tweeting the game. Brett Batty and Mark Vientos are clearly struggling here to start off spring training. I know a lot of fans are down and out. They don't have high hopes for these two players. I'm not in that same boat. I dropped a video earlier on the channel today talking about some qualitative metrics that I've been noticing in spring training, who's been impressing us versus who hasn't. It's not about results right now, although I know a lot of Mets fans don't have enough patience to wait for those statistics and those results to show themselves. Nonetheless, the process in which I saw Brett Batty and Mark Vientos take in these at-bats was not great today. Mark Vientos taking an 0 for 3 with 3 Ks, and Brett Batty having a pretty horrendous first at-bat before deciding to drop a bunt down the line for that single. I want to ask you all in the chat, what did you all think of Brett Batty's single? Hit the live chat. I definitely appreciate it. If you're watching this live, make sure you hit the live chat. I want to have an interactive episode because there's a lot of positives to talk about in this stream today with what we saw. A lot of positives from both sides. But I want to know what you all think. Did you like Brett Batty dropping a bunt down? For me personally, I know that right now, especially with as young as Mark Vientos and Brett Batty are, and they're struggling to begin this 2024 campaign, the mental side of this game is just as important to these ball players as the physical side. And when it rains, it pours. We're seeing it with these hitters early on, especially Brett Batty and Mark Vientos. They're batting under 200, which doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. I just told you the results don't matter only 2 weeks into spring training, but they just don't look like they're ready to swing the bat. I don't know if you all notice it, but that's what I'm noticing. The bat is very lazy and they're behind, and it just doesn't look like they're confident up at the plate. But what did you all think? Did you like the bunt? Because honestly, I kind of liked it from Brett Batty. I know that was a topic of discussion between Steve and Keith up in the booth during the game today. Keith saying he would much rather see Brett Batty just swing. It's spring training. There's no reason to drop a bunt down. You can do that in the regular season. I kind of like it though, because I think that it's valid, the point that Steve brought up, in that a player's confidence can go a long way to see a single like that happen. Now, I'm not saying it's going to turn Brett Baty's confidence around. He's going to start roping the ball. But you saw he went ahead and dropped the bunt. And then the next at bat, what did he do? He lined one off of the pitcher in Jeremy Barnes. Like, I like that result. That is a lot better than what we saw in that first at bat from Brett Batty. As opposed to Mark Vientos taking the 0 for 3. He doesn't drop a bunt down. I'm not expecting Mark Vientos, the presumed everyday DH as of right now, to drop a bunt down. That's not what I'm saying at all. But all I'm saying is that you see that ball go down, you reach first base, and a lot of good things can happen thereafter. But I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are. That's my thoughts. I liked it. Hopefully, Brett Batty and Mark Vientos both turn it around. Am I spinning at the wheels right now with these slow starts? No, but it does make you wonder how the Mets approach the rest of free agency, quote unquote, because there is a name of JD Martinez who we will talk about. You all probably know my thoughts and opinions on JD Martinez at this point for the New York Mets, knowing what we know from this front office. But there is something to be said for how does this front office view Mark Vientos and Brett Batty in this third base competition? I really, really am, I guess, not worried, but I'm curious to see how this progresses. Do I think anything changes between now and what I've been saying all offseason and us seeing Mark Vientos at the DH spot and Brett Batty at third base? No. But if we see another week, a week and a half of these two players struggling, and JD Martinez is still somehow in the market, because I don't think his market right now around the league is anything great or to write home about if you're JD Martinez or Scott Boras, then you might see a little bit of a shift in terms of the Mets approach. Now, I'm going to talk about that here in just a second, but I want to shout out a couple of comments. Lane, it seems like he is saying yes to liking the bunt from Brett Batty. Like I said, I understand both points of view. I understand Keith Hernandez doesn't like it. It's spring training. Why are we not having these guys swing? But I also understand the other side of it, the mental aspect of the game, and that a bunt can go a long way, and seeing that single go down Obviously, Brett Batty is not going to turn into a bunt specialist, but that can go a long way in terms of a player's confidence. So we'll see what happens. Shout out to Darren Rivera, member of the channel. Like I said, join the channel membership today. Darren, I got your t-shirt sending out tomorrow right directly to you. You'll get that in the mail, and hopefully you can send me over a picture of you sporting the brand new t-shirt, and I can toss it up on the community page. A lot more t-shirts to give out. Join the channel today. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support, Darren. And Aaron is saying, Beatty's desperate, man. This could be the deciding factor with winning the third base job, unfortunately. A bunt single. So I'm not going to go that far to say game 11 right now that we just witnessed is going to be that deciding factor off of one at bat. But I've been mentioning it the last couple of live streams with the process of what I'm seeing in these at-bats from both Batty and Vientos. Neither seems to want to take the bull by the horns. Yes, they each have a couple hits on spring training. I believe Mark Vientos does have an opposite field home run under his belt, but we're not seeing that confidence. Mark Vientos looking very shaky, a very hesitant up at that batter's box today. Brett Batty in that first at bat, the same thing, striking out on that off-speed pitch for strike 3. I don't know what it's going to take. And I'm not boiling it down to just mechanics with Brett Batty, Mark Vientos, but nonetheless, this is a discussion that we're always going to have to, monitor here on out from spring training. Let's face it. Every single time on X, when I see the lineup and I see Mark Vientos and Brett Batty's name in the lineup, I quote tweet the lineup and I say hashtag Brett Batty watch or hashtag Mark Vientos watch, because this competition is really interesting at this point. It's really interesting. Is Mark Vientos a shoo-in for the DH? I think so. I think so still, but I'm not as confident as I was going into spring training. Like I said, processes over results right now, but you can't ignore the processes that are happening in front of your very eyes. If Mark Vientos was going out there and scorching the ball, same thing with Brett Batty, and they were just lining into outs with line drives, and they were great swings, okay, that's a different story. But we're seeing some pretty bad at-bats right now, and that needs to change. But nonetheless, obviously, this was the Francisco Alvarez game. Great to see him gain that confidence with the bat, with the home run. And Carlos Mendoza pulled the plug on his day today after that home run and after that stellar showcase he displayed behind the plate. There's not really much of a better game that you can have than what Francisco Alvarez showed today. Joey Wendell, can we talk about this for a second? That was a very weird first inning for Jose Quintana, especially defensively for Joey Wendell. On the pickoff attempt to second base, Jose Quintana kind of threw it in the dirt, and Joey Wendell was forced to get on the knee. And I guess the umpire thought that he was blocking the runner's path back to the base, and the runner was awarded third base for quote-unquote interference. That riled me up a little bit because that cannot consistently be called in 2024 if that's how the MLB and these umpires are thinking about approaching this sort of play. The fielder has every right to that baseball, especially if it's not directly at him. And Joey Wendell really wasn't even impeding on the runner's ability to get back to the bag. But nonetheless, I hated that call. And obviously, everyone's talking about Joey Wendell at second base, making his Mets debut here in 2024, throwing across his body and bounces the ball over to Pete Alonso to allow the Nationals to score that first run. Listen, it's spring training. I understand Joey Wendell's a super utility man. I went over it on my podcast episode today, talking about that last bench spot. I really don't think Joey Wendell's spot is in jeopardy. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we're going to be talking about a situation where we have a competition for that fourth bench spot. We're talking about a DJ Stewart, a Trace Thompson, a G-Man Choi, or even the guy right here in your graphic to my left, Jose Iglesias. Jose Iglesias, journeyman, veteran, also a super utility man in the infield, just like Joey Wendell, can play shortstop, can play third base, can play second base. We've seen the leather, but we've also seen the bat from Jose Iglesias. And Aaron, if you're still in the chat, I know this is your guy. I know you're vying for him to make this team on opening day, and he is making a very good case for why he should be that. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think there are a lot of obstacles, and Joey Wendell being one of those obstacles for Jose Iglesias to crack this roster, but nonetheless gets into the game. I believe it was for, I want to say Harrison Bader, but I forgot who he subbed in for. Gets the first at bat, opposite field triple in the gap, and that is how he puts his mark on this game. I mean, that was an underrated pickup, and I know that he's primarily going to serve as minor league depth for this team, but if we keep having these conversations surrounding Brett Baty or Mark Vientos and nobody wants to win that third base job, you now have a couple of options. Jose Iglesias being one. Rylan Bannon is having a great spring training so far. Zach Short defensively also is having a great spring training so far. And obviously you have the mainstay probably in Joey Wendell, who refuses to wear batting gloves, and more props and more respect to him, because that has to be a lot of calluses on your hand. But nonetheless, this infield depth is nice, and I'm liking what we see early. But this is just spring training, guys. What am I talking about here? 11 games into spring training. Am I really going to judge Jose Iglesias getting a roster spot on this bench through however many at-bats he has right now? Or am I? I don't know, guys. This bench spot is going to be very interesting. There's a couple of different ways that the Mets can play it. I went over on my podcast episode today. If you haven't watched it, as soon as I'm done with this live stream, go over to that episode, hit the thumbs up, and I definitely appreciate the support on that. Get it to 20 thumbs ups. The Mets have a couple of different options here. If they are confident in Mark Vientos, they can shift over to maybe a Trace Thompson for that last bench spot. But if they're not confident in Mark Vientos, and I think we can all agree that this confidence amongst the fan base and maybe even the front office is starting to dwindle just a little bit in terms of being that primary everyday DH, you can now start to talk about a DJ Stewart or even a G-Man Choi for that last bench spot to supplement that platoon type role for the DH spot. Want to take a minute to shout out my main man, Ricardo, as well. Also a channel member, Trace Thompson for DH, and Jose Iglesias or Bannon at third base. So this was a very interesting topic of discussion as well. If you tune into the last live stream I did, recapping the Mets versus Yankees game, I had Talking Mets with Rob on, and shout out to him. He did an in-game live stream. Go check that out on his YouTube channel. He made the bold claim that he could see both Mark Vientos and Brett Baty in the minor leagues to start off 2024. And I was very shocked that Rob said that, because I still think it's very far-fetched to think that. I really think it's far-fetched. I don't think at 24 years old for both Brett Baty and Mark Vientos, I don't think it's feasible for them to start off in AAA. You are wasting valuable time that you have to evaluate them when it matters the most in the regular season. And this is where it comes down to, are the Mets seriously trying to compete in 2024 like David Stearns has said, which I do think there's a varying degree of truth behind that, but also how much evaluation are you really going to take into consideration here with Mark Vientos and Brett Baty for 2024? There's a give and take. You can't have both. It'd be great in a perfect world that you can evaluate Mark Vientos and Brett Baty while they're doing well, but the trade-off of them stinking it up and not reaching that full potential while also trying to win ball games is something that us as Mets fans and this Mets front office has to stare at directly in the face. And they could be faced with this tough decision come the opening day roster. So let me know what you think. Brett Baty, Mark Vientos, one of them or both of them, do they start in the minor leagues in your mind? Because for me, I simply can't sign up for that. I've been adamant all offseason that these guys cannot afford to start off in AAA and waste valuable time. The Mets need to see what they have to start off with. And that has to be in the first half. They cannot afford to wait to bring up Mark Vientos again for consistent at-bats in the second half. That's just simply not going to fly. This is the last chance Brett Baty and Mark Vientos have to make their stamp and their marker on this team. If it doesn't happen, no hard feelings. You're out of here, and we got prospects coming up to basically act as reinforcements at those respective positions. The Mets will find a way. Free agency is another great avenue, or maybe even a trade in the 2025 offseason. But this season is all about what we get contributions-wise from Mark Vientos and Brett Baty. Now, I know a lot of people are hitting the panic button. I'm not so much hitting the panic button right now. I understand that 2 bad weeks of spring training from Brett Batty and Mark Vientos is less than ideal, but also I realize that it's not the end all be all, and this is not the deciding factor or the defining factor of how their seasons are going to play out. Trust me, the confidence is lacking with those two right now. I understand that. But as soon as they get a couple of good at-bats under their belt, maybe they grind out a walk on a tough count, or maybe they see an infield single go through just like Brett Batty did today. Maybe something clicks in their minds. I know wishful thinking, a lot of you all are thinking that, but sometimes in the game of baseball, with how mental this game is, in terms of the mental aspect versus physical, that's all it takes sometimes. So we'll keep monitoring them. I'm sorry to overtake this sort of episode in this live stream with Mark Vientos and Brett Batty, but they do seem to be the hot topic of discussion right now amongst this fan base. And Ricardo's also saying here that he is done with Brett Batty and Mark Vientos. And it's still early. The line of it being still early does not work anymore. We are at the halfway mark of spring training. And you are absolutely right. We are 2 weeks into spring training, 3 weeks away from opening day. And like I said, Ricardo, to back up that point and also to back up my point is it's really a give or take situation with what the Mets are prioritizing right now in 2024. I think that I saw you also under one of my other live streams talking about the Mets may be prioritizing developmental kind of year this year. And this is sort of what we're going to have to be faced with. In all honesty, if we see Mark Vientos and Brett Batty continuously getting chances in 2024, if they're struggling, and especially if they're struggling, then we know that it's a developmental type year. We are forced to think that because it wouldn't make any other sense knowing you have all these other veteran presence vying for these spots like Jose Iglesias or anybody else that plays the infield, and they're not getting the opportunity. So it's sort of a give or take situation, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you all. It's a wait and see kind of game, but two things can be true at one time. You can have a developmental season and also try to win in the first half. Quite simple. I've said this time and time again. I think I need to remind everyone watching this. If the Mets' first half of the season doesn't go as planned, there will be a lot of trades, a sort of 2.0 of last offseason or last trade deadline happening in 2024. It's going to be the same thing because the Mets and David Stearns have brought in guys on tradable contracts. But by some, I'm not going to say miracle because I think the Mets will be competitive this year. I've been on record saying that. I think around 83, 84 wins is the peak for this team right now with how the roster is shaking out. I think that if they are close to a wild card spot, they will stand pat or maybe add one or two pieces to try to make a wild card run at the end of this season. It's a wait and see game, as Rob has said, as I have said. It's a wait and see game until the All-Star break, and we'll just see and evaluate how this team is looking thereafter. So Aaron's chiming in. Jose Iglesias, yeah, absolutely. He's having a really, really good spring training, and I do hope that he at some point gets his chance. I know he's a journeyman. I know he's a little bit of an afterthought right now, especially in a lot of Mets fans' minds, because we want to see what we have in our young guys. We want to see what we have in Brett Batty. Luis Angel Acuna also at that second base spot if there needs to be a little bit of a shift over in third base. But Jose Iglesias is there as insurance, and it's nice to know that we have that at the very minimum. If that's all we take away from it, at the very minimum. Darren is saying, remember Murphy, Turner, Darno, Sewald, Nolan Ryan. Mets gave up on all of them. Some players take time to develop. And in spring training, pitchers are usually ahead of the hitters. That's also a great point as well. Ricardo is right, and so are you, Darren. I think you guys are taking a little bit of opposite stances here, but I appreciate the input nonetheless. I'm kind of right in the middle of you all. I'm like 2 weeks is sufficient to sort of make assumptions on trends that are happening with these players, but also it's not enough time to give up on them completely. So I'm right in the middle there. And this about next week, week and a half of spring training is going to tell me a lot about which side I'm leaning toward with these two players. Now, quite simple. I am going to go on the record and say, no matter what happens with Brett Batty and Mark Vientos, I don't think they're going anywhere. And I think that they are going to see, the Mets front office is going to see this sort of, project through to see what they have in these two players. But it's going to be interesting nonetheless. But let's shift over from a little bit of offense to a little bit of pitching here, because I like what I saw across the board. Obviously, limiting the Nationals to only one run in this ball game. Again, this is the True Mets Talk podcast. If you are here, we got about 50 people in the chat. As always, make sure you're hitting your thoughts in the live chat. Hit the live chat, hit that thumbs up on the channel, and make sure you are subscribing if you are new here. We are going to continuously do these Mets spring training recaps on the channel all the way up until opening day, and I have a lot more planned out for you all. And I want to take this opportunity to announce that I am bringing on a guest next week on the True Mets Talk podcast, right after the Mets take on the Nationals on March 12th. It's going to be a nightcap around 9:15, same start time as this one. I'm going to be bringing on fellow Mets content creator and actually someone who covers the St. Lucie Mets, and that is going to be Ernest Dove. Make sure you follow him over on X. He does some great work. He covers a lot of the prospects that not many fans talk about. They're down in the lower levels, but he also conducts interviews with these prospects on his YouTube channel. If you want to go subscribe to his channel and get him closer to 300 subscribers, his link, his YouTube link is going to be in the description down below. Make sure you go check out the channel. He's conducted interviews with a lot of prospects. Tyler Stewart, I believe, was the most recent one that I checked out, but a whole lot more great content. He'll be joining me on this live stream as we talk a little bit more about the Mets versus Nationals on March 12th, but also get into some of his most underrated prospects, some of the prospects that not many fans are talking about. We all know about the Drew Gilberts. We all know about the Luis Angel Acuñas, the Jet Williams, the Mike Vazzels, the Christian Scotts, but some of those other younger prospects that we might not have been introduced to just yet. That's exactly what Ernest does on his channel and his pages. So make sure you go check him out. I am excited for that. Okay, let's continue on. I want to get into some more comments here. Ricardo is saying, worst case, I can live with one of the two stinking it up for the case of development, but definitely not both. And this is where I'm going to try. Listen, I'm going to actually favorite this comment because this is a great comment, Ricardo. Shout out to you, always supporting the channel, always supporting the chat. I am going to go ahead and pin this because we're going to come back to this during my next slide. So just hold on. Wait 1 second. Let's continue to talk about these pitchers. Quintana impressed. I believe he went 3 innings. I have my graphic wrong. It only says 2, but I think he went 3, 6 Ks, had the put away pitches, was only sitting 91 to 92 on his fastball, but was locating very well. And obviously caught an unlucky break with the Joey Wendell error. I believe it was an error, not an infield hit. That seemed more like an error to me, although it was kind of close. It seemed like it was going to be an infield hit, but I'm not sure how they scored it. Gave up 4 hits across 3 innings pitched, 6 strikeouts, had everything working for him, and he just simply didn't benefit from that play from Joey Wendell, as well as that bogus interference call on Joey Wendell at second base on the attempted pickoff. Jose Quintana, a guy that a lot of Mets fans are asking if he's going to be the opening day starter. We talk about Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, who would be my pick, but also Tyler McGill, who has impressed so far early on in this spring training. These guys are vying for this opening day job in lieu of this Kodai Senga injury. So we'll see if Jose Quintana gets the nod. Adam Ottavino makes his Mets debut after a very weird offseason where he opted out of his contract, went on SNY for a couple of episodes, talked about why he left the Mets, only to come back to the New York Mets on a cheaper deal than what he would have made on his previous contract. Shout out to Adam Ottavino. Truly wanted to be a New York Met, but wanted to make sure the organization was heading in the right direction. Apparently liked what he saw, or maybe there just wasn't enough competitive offers for Adam Ottavino. I don't know, but he looked pretty decent today. I believe he led off the opening batter. He let him off with a walk. First pitch, like I said earlier on this stream, tried to steal on Adam Ottavino like everybody did last season and was successful at it. But what happened? We've seen a little bit of differences in processes, and the booth was talking about this with Adam Ottavino, trying to cut down on that mound to home, I guess, home to first, however you want to call it, cutting down that time to the plate to not allow the runners to get a good jump, but also studying other right-handed pitchers in the game that were successful with pickoff attempts, mainly being Taijuan Walker, I believe the booth was saying today, in hopes of limiting the running damage against him. He was one of the worst pitchers outside of Noah Syndergaard last season in the run prevention category, or their stolen bases prevention category of holding runners on. That needs to change, especially we all know he struggles with walks from 2022 to 2023. That walk rate went through the roof. So if that's going to continue, he needs to hold these runners at bay, because at the end of the day, you can knock Adam Ottavino for not holding runners on, but when those runners get to scoring position, he's pretty decent at keeping them at bay and not allowing the other team to score at a high rate. So shout out to Adam Ottavino, put together a scoreless inning in his first outing of this 2024 spring training. Jake Diekman as well. He's gotten off to a little bit of a rocky start. So has Jorge Lopez. They both turned in very clean innings. 1 innings pitched for both. Lopez has looked a lot better, induced some, I guess, decent contact, but they hit him right where the fielders were, and he got out of these innings clean. Jake Diekman, what was impressive to me, and the at-bat that really stood out to me, is Lane Thomas took him for a ride to deep left center field. It's a deep ballpark over there in Florida where they're playing at. And Lane Thomas hit it to the warning track. The very next at-bat, James Wood comes up to the plate, who has been absolutely mashing the ball for the Washington Nationals, was one of the top prospects that came over to the Nationals, I believe, in that Juan Soto deal from the Padres. Left-handed power bat, and he stepped into the batter's box against Jake Diekman. Now, the funky delivery that Jake Diekman has against lefties and that angle that he takes with his arm, a little bit of three-quarters action, makes it very tough for lefties to see the ball well out of his hand. And that's exactly what we saw today with James Wood. Jake Diekman got James Wood to ground out right back to Mr. Diekman, inducing some weak contact. And that's what really stands out to me, because you talk about lefty specialists. Obviously, you have Brooks Raley reserved for the later innings. This is going to be one of the mainstays in this Mets bullpen, especially earlier on into the game, maybe your 5th or 6th inning type. Maybe if he does well and proves himself, your 7th inning type in Jake Diekman. Great to see him get back on track. And obviously, the man of the hour, the pitcher that's gotten the most buzz out of anybody in Mets camp, that hasn't even stepped onto the mound in spring training before tonight, in Shintaro Fujinami. Wow. Listen, Fujinami induced some contact. There was some contact off of him. Very weak contact. Did very well. Got a fly ball. Got a ground out. I forgot how he got his third out. But the location was great. The location was great for Fujinami. No walks. Very clean inning. And he wasn't even throwing his hardest. He was sitting 93 to 94. He's got a great arsenal. 5-pitch arsenal for Shintaro Fujinami. Fastball, splitter, cutter, slider, curveball. And he was throwing 93 to 94, but the movement was insane. It was insane. If you look at the tail that his pitches had today, down and into right-handed batters and down and away to left-handed batters, that is something that's going to be Shintaro Fujinami's bread and butter. Was very impressed with what Shintaro Fujinami was able to display. Maybe, I'm not sure if this is going to be a common trend. Obviously, probably taking it easy in his first outing of spring training, but wasn't throwing his hardest at all. We know that he can get up to 100, 101 miles per hour. Is this something that Jeremy Hefner is going to have Shintaro Fujinami do on a consistent basis? That remains to be seen. I think he's going to slowly ramp his way up to 97, 98, but we know he had a lot of control issues in his rookie season last season. How does that differ? And what can Jeremy Hefner get out of Shintaro Fujinami? Now, this is very interesting when we're talking about Shintaro Fujinami. The broadcast did a great job bringing this point up that a lot of people don't really, I guess, think about when it comes to the minor league options that Shintaro Fujinami has. You talk about a very crowded bullpen. I went over it on my podcast drop today. The first 5 guys are shoo-ins for this bullpen. I'm talking about Jake Diekman, Jorge Lopez, Edwin Diaz, Brooks Raley, and Adam Ottavino. That is 5 bullpen spots that are not being taken by anybody else. Those guys are shoo-ins. But how does the rest of the bullpen, with the plethora of options that we've seen, how does that get deciphered? We have Shintaro Fujinami, obviously vying for one of those spots. Drew Smith is up there, the longest tenured Mets pitcher. He's up there. Austin Adams has been impressive. Michael Tonkin has been impressive. Yaxel Rios, Johan Ramirez, Cole Sulser. The list goes on and on and on and on. Now, my initial thinking is that the 5 guys that I just mentioned, plus Shintaro Fujinami, plus Drew Smith, because I don't think no matter what happens, Drew Smith is going to be let go, and he's not going to make this opening day roster. I think he's a shoo-in for that, for better, for worse. We'll see. But also, you need a long man in that bullpen. Can Shintaro Fujinami be that long man, or is it going to be reserved for a guy like Jose Butto, who's been impressive, or a Joey Lucchesi? And I know Lane was talking about in the comment section, how do you feel about Joey Lucchesi? I like Joey Lucchesi a lot. I think that the Mets bullpen roster, the way it rounds out is Joey Lucchesi goes in there for being the long man. Shintaro Fujinami and Drew Smith take those last 2 roster spots. You're only allowed 13 pitchers on the roster. The New York Mets and any other MLB team is only allowed 13 pitchers on the roster. 5 rotation spots, presumably, and you get that 6th-day starter as your spot setup guy or your long man in Joey Lucchesi, and then you have 7 other bullpen guys to play with over there in terms of the 5th through 9th inning, or however long the starter is able to go. This bullpen is very deep. It's very deep because you have a lot of guys that are going to be starting in the minor leagues. Nate Lavender is another name that I didn't even mention in this list that is vying for that opening day spot. I don't think the Mets are going to carry 3 lefties in the pen if your setup man, like if your setup man's a lefty, okay, they're carrying 3 lefties in the pen. But if your setup man, or not your setup man, but your long man is a righty, they're definitely only going 2 lefties. There's no reason to have 4 lefties in that bullpen. But Nate Lavender's making a case for if Drew Smith slips up and the Mets are giving him a short leash this season, this could be an opportunity for Nate Lavender to come onto this roster earlier than anybody would expect. He's 24 years old. He's not some young prospect, exciting prospect that we've been seeing here and that's just coming up, that has a lot more of years left to prove. We need to know what Nate Lavender is going to do in this organization right now. This season would be great with him being 24 years old. So the bullpen, lots of competition. This is something that I'm heavily watching as we go through spring training. Not only the bench and who gets the last spot, but also the bullpen, who gets those last 2 to 3 spots in the bullpen. Hopefully that rant all makes sense. But a great game nonetheless, guys. It was quick. Did anybody in the live chat think that this game was quick? It went by 2 hours, 10 minutes. It was breezing by. It's like I blinked and it was already the 9th inning. It was crazy. I was like, I might have to push this stream up a little bit by 15 to 20 minutes. And that's exactly what I did. But that was a crazy game. Out after out, it was smooth. Not many long innings. Credit to the pitching on both sides of the ball. It was great. I love it. As always, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button. Become a channel member today. 2 great channel membership options. One of them in which you get free merchandise, a free CP New York Sports long sleeve t-shirt. Become a channel member today. However you can support the podcast, make sure you go ahead and do it. Not only becoming a channel member, but just hitting that thumbs up and subscribing is awesome. And I appreciate the support in that way as well. Let's move on to the topic that has been plaguing Mets Twitter as of recent, especially with the guys from the New York Post driving this discussion and JD Martinez. Like, the game was exciting today, but I feel like a lot of people are on two sides of the spectrum here in terms of this JD Martinez discussion. Some people are eating it up because Brett Batty and Mark Vientos are struggling, and they're like, what a perfect time to have JD Martinez on this roster, and he's still available. And the other half are like, let's literally just forget about this. I'm tired of hearing JD Martinez. I'm tired of hearing all about him. I want to put this discussion to bed and get on with the rest of the season. I'm sort of in the middle here because I do think that JD Martinez still makes perfect sense for this team in terms of the roster construction standpoint. This team, flat out, if they want to perform at its highest, if they want to hit their peak in terms of the win total, JD Martinez is a no-brainer. I think anybody knows that. Back-to-back-to-back All-Star in his last 3 seasons, I think it's a no-brainer. But at what price does JD Martinez come with? Because you're not only talking about monetary price, but you're also talking about reduced reps for Mark Vientos and Brett Batty. Now, I know a lot of people that are tuning into this or will tune into the replay of this will say, okay, cool. I'm fine with seeing less of Brett Batty and Mark Vientos. Give me JD Martinez because he's going to win us more ball games. Well, is the front office in that same line of thinking? And this is where I wanted to bring up Ricardo's comment because it was such a great segue comment to this discussion. He says, worst case, I can live with one of the two. He's talking about Brett Batty or Mark Vientos stinking it up for the case of development and the greater good of development, but definitely not both. And this is where JD Martinez would still make sense for this team in my eyes. If JD Martinez were to be signed, obviously we know about the tax penalty. We know the latest report in JD Martinez's asking price is around $20 million at last time that we heard that the San Francisco Giants were in negotiation with him before they signed Jorge Soler. Could that have dropped by a couple $1 million from that point till now? Yes, absolutely. But I don't know how much his price is going to drop, and this is going to be dictated by his market. But what would make perfect sense in my eyes is that JD Martinez automatically becomes your everyday DH by default. We know he has a great bat, is not going to play in the field. We don't even need to have him play anywhere in the field. It doesn't matter. He can be the permanent DH. And then you also have Mark Vientos and Brett Batty truly sticking to that third base competition. And that's going to be a situation where truly the best man wins. And that reinforces this thought of we can deal with one of these guys stinking it up, but definitely not both with the case of Brett Batty and Mark Vientos. Does that make a little bit of sense? That's kind of my line of thinking right now. But like a lot of people are pointing out, this Mets payroll is strapped right now. They can go out there and spend the 16, 17, 18 million dollars on JD Martinez if they want to. But that's going to turn into 28, 29, 30 million dollars for one season of JD Martinez. And that's just reinforcing the bad habits of overspending on players that truly aren't going to make all the world of a difference of making this team a wild card team versus a World Series contender. JD Martinez does not do that for you. So at what point are we willing to say, okay, screw Brett Batty and Mark Vientos in their development. Let's just go get the seasoned proven vet versus let's take a step back, continue on the path of having this be a developmental season and just ride with Mark Vientos and Brett Batty in those respective positions, maybe with a DH platoon of G-Man Choi or DJ Stewart as your left-handed DHs. Like, what point are we either going to accept it or keep pushing this front office to explore? Now, I have no doubts that the Mets and David Stearns are doing their due diligence, not only with JD Martinez, but also the pitchers that are out there in the market who are also rep by Scott Boras. But I don't think it's serious enough. And those asking prices are not going to come all the way down enough for the Mets to bite, knowing what we know about the luxury tax, the Steve Cohen tax, and how this current roster is shaking out from the developmental aspect. And I'm using that word a lot in this stream, I know, but it really is just the theme of the hour right now when we're talking about a struggling Mark Vientos and Brett Baty is development. So it's a give or take situation. It's a give or take situation. If I had to guess and just state blindly and give a yes or no, are we signing JD Martinez? My gut feeling has been for the last couple of weeks, no, we're not. We're not. Because everything the front office has done and said has made me believe that they believe in Mark Vientos, or they're going to at least give Mark Vientos a shot, whether they believe in him as a long-term option or not. But it's very interesting. JD Martinez is still out there, coupled to the fact that his market right now probably isn't the greatest. I mean, chat, please help me out. Besides the New York Mets and maybe the Los Angeles Angels, who are a wreck of an organization over there on the West Coast, just losing Shohei Ohtani, besides these two teams, what other team needs JD Martinez? I want to say maybe the Marlins. I don't know the ins and outs of their roster right now. I want to say the Marlins, but I can't confidently say the Marlins. But like, what other team truly needs that solidified DH and JD Martinez? And we already see whatever his market is, those teams, just like the Mets, are waiting out his market. So it's going to be very interesting. We've got about 3 weeks left until opening day. Wow. I mean, this is something that I've truly have never seen. And the hitting aspect is fine, whatever. Hitters can get acclimated, but it's about the pitchers in terms of curbing any injuries. Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, like they're going to have to ramp up very quick, even if they were to sign tonight. The ramping up of their pitching routine and their outings to be ready for opening day is going to be a large stretch as well. Like, it's crazy to me what Scott Boras and his clients have gone through this offseason. You really see these MLB teams and front offices pushing back and just basically telling Scott Boras, listen, we're not giving in to your demands. We're not doing it. So Ricardo saying the Padres, Cubs, and Cardinals wouldn't surprise me for JD. Yeah, I can see that. I can see the Padres coming out of left field and doing that. I can definitely see that. I can also see the Cubs doing that. I'd have to look at the Cardinals roster because I'm not sure exactly where they're at. But those are some good options. So throw the Mets and the Angels, maybe even the Marlins in with these clubs, and that is probably your market for JD Martinez. Are you telling me the Mets are really going to outbid any of these teams for JD Martinez if it comes down to it, when they already have Mark Vientos and Brett Baty, and they've already said what they said to the media about these guys? I don't think so, but who knows? David Stearns can have one last trick up his sleeve, and he can prove me wrong and everybody else wrong that just wants to put these JD Martinez discussions to bed. Because I'm kind of tired of talking about it, but we're sitting here on March 7th. He's still unsigned, and we have to talk about it. So I don't know. I don't know where we're at. 57 people in the chat. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you to everyone commenting your thoughts and opinions. Hit that thumbs up for me. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support. It means a lot. Make sure you're subscribing if you're new here. Bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the icon. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Make sure you're hitting the live chat. I'm going to be on here for maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. If you all have any questions for me to go over, make sure you hit the live chat right now. We'll answer those. Become a channel member today. Find me, usually live tweeting games, at CPNY Sports. And by the way, if you somehow missed the announcement, we have a great collaboration between myself and Talking Mets with Rob going down starting on opening day. I'm going to advertise it one more time because I'm very, very excited about this collaboration. The Amazing Mets pregame show live will be streamed to both YouTube channels, and it's going to kick off on opening day against the Brewers. We're going to be going into pregame talking points, previews, series previews, all things New York Mets. We're going to keep it interactive, and I hope that you all enjoy all the rest of our content. We've done Mets Hot Stove Lives. We've done Mets Spring Training Lives. We've done the Mets Roundtable Podcast. But now we're doing the Amazing Mets pregame show live, and I am ecstatic about it, and I'm sure you all are going to enjoy it. We're going to be talking about the Mets, whether it's 30 minutes before the game, whether it's an hour before the game. We'll be breaking some news if we get some injury updates in the pregame show as well. All your latest Mets updates before the game actually happens. Probably on a nightly basis. We're going to try to do it as much as we can over the course of 162. Obviously, we have lives outside of YouTube as well. But for the most part, we're going to try to give you all what you want in consistent Mets content. So, yeah, Ricardo, absolutely. We are not getting JD. I've already made peace with that. Me too. I've already made peace with that. But you know what? Sometimes that's better to make peace with it and also then be pleasantly surprised if by some miracle or stretch of the imagination it happens. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I look at it. So we'll see. But yeah, kind of shifting away to the JD Martinez conversation. Obviously we had a game today. It was a great game, fast game. You see the 1-9 lineup. Jose Iglesias coming in, making an immediate impact. Jose Quintana, Adavino, Diekman, Lopez, Fujinami holding it down. Brandon Nimmo, a lot of conversation here on the Mets content creation community, also on Mets X or Mets Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays, is talking about Brandon Nimmo. Is he best suited at the leadoff spot, or is he best suited if JD Martinez doesn't get signed and we're still looking at the middle of this order with no protection behind Pete Alonso? Can he move down in the order? But I will say I haven't been a proponent of it for most of this offseason. But I could be, if the Mets are stubborn enough not to move Brandon Nimmo out of that leadoff spot, I could be on board, I guess, if it comes down to it, with seeing Francisco Alvarez right behind Pete Alonso as that protection. I still think it's going to be a tough task in year 2 for Alvarez, especially because he kind of struggled down the stretch last season. I know he turned out a great rookie campaign, 25 home runs, but you look at the average, you look at a little bit of a struggle that he had down the stretch. I think that's immense pressure to put on a young player like Francisco Alvarez, who is taking on double duties behind the plate in the next half inning. I would like to see that reserved maybe for more a veteran player. That's why I've thrown Brandon Nimmo's name out there, but we'll continue to see. Listen, if this roster stays pat as it is right now, and there's no other additions like JD Martinez, and we're looking at Mark Vientos and Brett Batty playing every day, this lineup cannot afford to be that top heavy. And Carlos Mendoza cannot afford to keep this lineup consistent, because you're going to have a great 1 through 5. And then you're going to have 6, 7, 8, who's all wild cards. Brett Batty, Mark Vientos, Harrison Bader, and whoever is taking the last spot there that I didn't mention. Maybe probably Jeff McNeil is going to be that guy. So this is going to be a very top-heavy lineup. There needs to be some shakeup. And maybe we'll talk more about it as the season kicks off. Maybe as we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the season, and we have a little bit of sample size to go off of how this offense is performing. But that's something to keep into consideration. That is something to keep into consideration. Carlos saying, what's up, CP? And fellow Mets fan, shout out to you, Carlos. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate it. We're just about 52, now going on 53 minutes into the stream. Hit that thumbs up for your boy. Keep commenting in the live chat, all that good stuff. I appreciate the support on the channel. This is pretty much all I had today for you all. Going over a quick recap. Mets versus Nationals had some great things to go off of. Shintaro Fujinami, great debut. Francisco Alvarez, both with the bat and with his leather, throwing out runners behind the plate, even with Adam Ottavino on the mound 2 times. Great things happening. Impressive things happening. But also on the other side of things, maybe a little bit more negative, maybe a little bit more, let's wait and see how it plays out. We have the struggles of Brett Batty, Mark Vientos. You can even throw in Starling Marte there. He's not looking too hot with the bat as of yet, but it's good to see that he's healthy. And Harrison Bader, by the way, as well. I'm not even sure he has a hit yet on spring training in his limited sample size. I'm not expecting much out of the bat from Harrison Bader anyways this season, so it doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, I appreciate you all tuning in. This is all the announcements that I had. If you missed the announcement at the top of the podcast or maybe midway through, I am having Ernest Dove on the channel next week to talk about some prospects. We're going to be talking about Mets versus Nationals on March 12th at 9 p.m. after the Mets game concludes. I'm going to be having him on the channel. Go follow him on X. Follow him down on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. It's going to be in the description down below. This is my official announcement. It's going to be a great discussion. We're going to be talking Mets baseball, the upcoming season, spring training, and Mets prospects that are flying under the radar that you all might not be aware of. I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for tuning into this live stream. Like I said, keep supporting the podcast. Hit that thumbs up. We are well on our way to 600 subscribers, and the support has been great on the channel. If you are just tuning in, like you, Carlos, just dropping into the live chat, check out the replay. A lot of good discussions, and I appreciate everyone tuning in the live chat and giving their thoughts and opinions. As always, let's go Mets. Don't forget, Interstate Mets Report tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. It's going to be, unfortunately, the finale of the Interstate Mets Report. We've been doing this for quite some time. I think we're taking a little bit of a step back on the Interstate Mets Report, and we're going to be doing each of our respective content on the channel for the Mets. We have some scheduling issues as well. That's partly the reason why we are ceasing the Interstate Mets Report for the foreseeable future. But we do have that going down the finale at 3:30 p.m. Lots of great content coming up on the channel, not only tomorrow, but also throughout the rest of the spring training season and the regular season. Keep an eye out on all the future guests coming up. I'm going to be having a lot of other different projects in the works. And like I said, I appreciate the support. Make sure you hit that thumbs up one last time. Subscribe. And until next time, guys, it's been your boy CP, and we are out. Peace.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out all the latest content on the channel. Thank you.